Thanks, Jeff, and good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. As Jeff told you, I've made a lot of films and a lot of TV shows and written for newspapers and magazines since 1974. My trade has taken me all over the world, from Shanghai to Paris, Amsterdam to Buenos Aires, from the Swiss Alps to the Australian outback, from the Arctic to the Antarctic, and it's been a great ride. And I've met a lot of interesting people: musicians, writers, prime ministers, astronauts, inventors, tycoons, murderers. And here are some of them. I'd like to roll a video, the DVD, please, just to give you a sample.
We're in New York with Robin Williams, and we're talking about Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yes, we are, dear.
Isn't the real reason you took this role because you like wearing those clothes just a little bit?
Yes, it is. And I'd like to talk about it here before I go on, Geraldo. This week, Men in Foam. I enjoyed it. I'm not going to lie to you. Putting on that beanbag bodysuit and those 3-inch heels, I felt more like myself than ever before. And I just want to say it here.
You're working with Andie MacDowell, a very attractive lady. Did you know that Harold Ramis described the chemistry between you as sort of a Beauty and the Beast kind of relationship?
Gee, how did Andy take that? Terrible. Whew. Boy, that's cruel. I don't know why the heck he would say something about that. I mean, she's very nice. I mean, why does he have to dwell on what she looks like?
Congratulations with Born Supremacy
Thanks.
Born Identity as well. These are great pictures. And quite frankly, this is not a role I saw you doing.
Me neither, actually. Yeah, and that was a concern of mine going back to, you know, being offered the first one. I had long discussions with the director about how to build a character that would be believable.
Congratulations on iRobot. This is an absolutely fantastic looking picture.
Thank you very much.
And you're pretty good looking in it.
No, thank you, thank you.
First 15 seconds or so, we see you wake up, and we learn really quickly that you've got a fantastic body.
Yeah, you know, because it was important to get that out the way, you know, in the film, you know. See, a lot of people, you know, wait 25 or 30 minutes into the movie. You know, Brad Pitt and Troy, he waited till 30 minutes into the movie, something like that. You know, but I like to go ahead and get my nakedness out the way.
You told me going to the Oscars is a great date. Is it a better date when you win?
Well, it's you're really much more worried about getting there on time. No, it's not so much first of all, you're constantly, you don't really have conversations with your date because you're always constantly worried about, you know, what's going to happen. You're kind of distracted. And then if you lose, you're completely bummed out, you know, and then you got to essentially go off and, you know, and deal with that. But if you win, they whisk you off and they talk to you all night long, so that's not that much fun either.
This is your 10th Western as a feature film. In an era, supposedly, when Westerns aren't that hip or aren't that successful, how come you keep making them? What is it about Westerns that you like?
I just have always liked them. I think you can make them hip if just by approaching good stories. There's always, it's a part of Americana that it's a sort of an art form that we can lay claim to.
Were you ready for the fame?
No.
In some cases, even the notoriety, because it was a part that everybody talked about, with scenes that everybody talked about.
Yeah. No, it was fabulous, but no, I wasn't ready. I was completely stunned, overwhelmed, amazed. I'm still amazed. I just came back from Italy, where I was at the Italian Academy Awards, and thousands of screaming fans were ripping the rearview mirrors off my car and beating on the window and pounding and screaming my name, and the bodyguards were being sucked into the crowd, and the pandemonium was breaking loose, and suddenly I realized why Elvis was fat and on drugs.
Chevy, I'd like to ask about your career, and it's been distinguished, I think by...
Distinguished? It has?
Just a minute.
I'm happy to hear it for you.
By perhaps some of the worst movies ever made. I mean...
Thank you. I like your sweater. Jill St. John wants it back.
Well, you've put out a novel about every year since 1969, which is an amazingly prolific track record. You do not seem to have writer's block. Is there such a thing for you?
Well, I don't know what that is. I don't believe in writer's block. What is it? That you can't think of what to write? You're not in the mood to write? When you're not in the mood, when you don't think you're in the mood, the best thing to do is just sit down and start writing.
This brings me to a line in that story where it happens twice in the movie. Someone says, "Is this heaven?" and I think Ray Kinsella says, no, it's Iowa. Is that your line?
Oh yes, that's mine. I loved Iowa very much. I went there as a graduate student, and I really fell in love with it.
But that line seems to sum up just what you said about religion and illusions and atheism and everything else.
If you say so.
The coverage that your book has received, the film has received, has led to many people describing you as a hero, and some people being critical, saying that you and your men failed. How do you feel about it? Are you a hero, or did you fail?
I am absolutely not a hero. I commanded a mission that failed. And as a commander, I failed in bringing that mission about. And so at no time is there any sort of context of me being a hero.
When I think about the city of Beijing adding 600,000 people a year, when I think about how long this has been here, it just does remind me that everything we do, we're doing in order to build for future generations that we will never know.
Were you a model student, would you say?
No, far from it. I was, my report cards always used to read, and I remember this, always had a comment from the teacher, is capable of doing better.
There was a guy looking at me in the third row with binoculars, third row. And I'm thinking, wow, thank God I got my electrolysis, and you know, it's just, you're just thinking, holy crap, that's a close shot. So I had the house lights turned up, and I said, that guy right there, why don't you come up and get a really good, in fact, come up for a kiss. Why don't you come on up here? And he's kind of fumbling, getting through the aisle and fumbling. The usher's helping him to get up to the stage and fumble, and he gets up to me, and I'm like, so how am I looking? And he goes, well, I'm legally blind. I died.
When you grew up in St. Albert, Grant Fuhrer was one of your idols, right? I mean, he was a black player in a predominantly white league. This was one of the reasons that you thought a lot of him?
Oh, absolutely. I did follow as many black players in the NHL as I could. You know, I remember kids used to say, you know, what do you want to be when you're older? And I'd say, well, I want to be an NHL player. And they'd say, well, geez, what, you know, what are the chances? There's not really any black players in the NHL. So it meant a lot to me to be able to look around and find as many as I could. And Grant Fuhrer was right there in Edmonton, you know, starring. He was an all-star, winning Stanley Cups. That was one of the highlights of my career, was getting a chance to play with him.
Your father was telling you when he first saw you that you should do jokes like everybody else, and you were saying, no, no, I'm different. I'm going to really exploit the fact I'm different. I'm the only guy doing this.
Yeah.
That's what worked for you. And when did you know it was when it was working?
Well, when I started getting the laughs just for doing, I mean, I also knew as a teenager when I would get into situations, I would put the Indian accent on and I would see people get completely disarmed. And I always knew humor was a good way of disarming people. Even when I was boxing, I would be sparring with a guy, and if he was relatively hard to hit, I would get in, I would work my way in close and then clinch with him, and then I would tell him stuff like, you smell fantastic. And you tell another man who's wearing a tank top with you that you smell fantastic, and you got boxing gloves on, you watch them get frazzled, and they're like, hey, get off me. And the minute they would drop their guard, boom, you hit them with a right hand. But it's the same thing with comedy. You know, you disarm them, and then you hit them with the punchline.
Wayne Gretzky says in hockey, you don't score 100% of the time on the shots you don't take. Makes sense? In business, you all know this, you don't make the sales if you don't make the calls. And in journalism, you don't get the answer if you don't ask the question. And you'd be amazed at how many journalists don't ask the toughest questions and don't get the best answers. You saw me interview Jerome McGinley and talk about race, and that's seldom done. You talk to Russell Peters, and again, you talk about race. Your dad said you should just do jokes like everybody else, don't talk about your Indian heritage. Russell Peters did it the other way around, and he now sells out Madison Square Garden. There's wisdom, but only if you ask the tough question. Jan Arden, wonderful singer from Calgary and one of the funniest people I know. I ask her tough questions. Eastwood, why are you making Westerns? They're not hip. Great answer. The guy owns the room, by the way, the most confident person I've ever met. Nenshi and I walked the Great Wall of China together, and it was quite a workout for the mayor. He wasn't used to that kind of a climb. I always thought the Great Wall was kind of like this. It's not, it's like the Rocky Mountains. And he was kind enough to say, you know, it was tough for me, but it was tougher on the cameraman who was walking up backward. And that is the mayor in a nutshell. He's got a great sense of humor and self-deprecation. Sharon Stone, when I talked to her, she was at the very peak of her career after Basic Instinct. The next interview that Sharon Stone did with us, Kirsty did it. And by the way, Sharon Stone is very, very smart, maybe 150 IQ, and very pretty, and funny. And so Kirsty did the next interview, and she came home and she told me, you know, I was sitting outside the hotel room waiting to go in to interview her, and she came out and said, oh, I've just got to change, and the crew's in there, I hope you don't mind. And she took off her top and put on another top, and she wasn't wearing a bra. And by the way, her body is perfect. And she went back in, and we did the interview, and then she looked at me and she said, Larry, why are you crying? Anyway, my point is we all interview, whether you're a boss or an employee, a teacher or a student, buying or selling. And if you're selling, you better be interviewing in a smart way. And if you're on a first date, trust me, you are in an interview. Asking questions is how I have made my living, and I've been doing it for nearly 40 years with articles and TV and films. I figure about 250 interviews a year, so about 10,000 interviews so far. I even married a journalist, and as you know, Kirsty is quite a successful author now. Jeff was kind enough to mention some of her books. She's now working on a couple of television pilots and a new book with Marty McSorley, Gretzky's bodyguard, you might call him. We have a great partnership. Kirsty writes and I watch her write. She likes story first. Yes, Marty McSorley is a famous hockey player, but better than that, he's got a great story. And I think Kirsty and I have a fairly interesting story. I hope you like it because that's what I wanted to share with you today. Years ago, we started and co-hosted a show called The Movie Show about movies and movie stars, and we ended up syndicating that show in 70 countries around the world. Now, we were competing with Entertainment Tonight, which was owned by Paramount Pictures, and CNN, which was owned by Warner Brothers, and we weren't even based in Hollywood. We were based in a little town called Calgary. And we were fairly successful. We'd get postcards from Calgarians saying, we just saw you on TV here in Thailand, or we just saw you speaking Japanese. They had dubbed us in Japanese in Tokyo. And we did almost 3,000 episodes of that show, and it led to our family business. We did it because we were too dumb to know that it was impossible. And so now we have built a studio in Calgary with 2 sound stages, 9 edit suites, 2 sound mixing rooms, computer animation, web design, the whole works. And we've got about 60 employees, and we turn out a lot of films, music specials, TV series, and corporate videos. It is a long way from where I started. I grew up on a farm in Saskatchewan, and you know that province, the hardest to spell, the easiest to draw. It's really built like a football field, if you think about it, which is where Rider Pride, I think, starts. As a kid growing up, my brother and I were automatically part of that family business, key members of the management team. Every job that was too unpleasant, too labor-intensive, too smelly for an adult to do went to us. And that meant pretty much every job that involved shoveling. We lived literally in a little house on the prairie. Linoleum floors, 4 kids in 1 bedroom, dad and mom in the other. My mom sewed our school clothes, and we drove a 36 Plymouth, which you would find now probably at the Heritage Park Museum. The back doors opened like that, front to the back, and one time one of them popped open and my brother fell out of the car as we were driving down Highway 6. And he got scraped up pretty bad, but no broken bones. He was a tough kid. Working on a farm back then was high risk. You seldom shook hands with a farmer who had all 10 fingers. My dad didn't. But poor as we were, we ate like kings. My mom had a huge garden, so we had fresh vegetables, and we, how do you put it, we harvested the livestock. We even butchered a pig, and my mom never liked to waste, so she boiled that pig's fat into lard on a wood stove in the basement, and the house smelled like a McDonald's for the next 6 months. It was a grain farm, but we had cattle, pigs, chickens, turkeys. In fact, I was actually attacked by turkeys when I was 3. And a turkey can be a mean bird if you're small and they're hunting in a pack. And they knocked me down, and they were jumping all over me, and my mother came roaring out of the house with a broom and started knocking them off me like Babe Ruth hitting home runs. I don't think I was ever happier to see her. I got into my first family business raising chickens with my brother. We took care of my dad's whole brood, about a couple hundred, feeding, watering, cleaning up, and we got 8 chicks each to sell ourselves. I remember my cut at the end of the year was $8.20, and I put that in the Bank of Montreal. There's a few BMO people here. At the corner of Albert and Victoria in Regina. And I've been with the Bank of Montreal ever since, so maybe that's why I've been asked to speak here. We were driving tractors in the field at 10. We drove a truck at 12, working sunrise to sunset. Some of those summer days on the prairie can be pretty long. But I am not complaining, because it's a great thing for a kid to feel like he's making a contribution, and who doesn't want to drive a truck when he's 12? You've heard of today's generation, they're called failure to launch. Kids hanging around the house until they're 25, maybe dropping back in a couple of years later when they're 27. I did not have failure to launch. When you have been shoveling from 8 to 18, you are ready to move on to something else. And I went to university, I studied English, I got a job in Ottawa, studied some French there, hit the road, hitchhiked around the world, got a kind of a taste for adventure and curiosity, got into journalism school, and that's when I discovered what I really wanted to do. I think it's very good advice to tell kids that you do not have to know at 17 or 18 what your whole life is going to be. You know, it's okay to try a few things out, test drive if you want, find your love. And from journalism school, I got some fantastically lucky breaks. My first job was at CTV in Ottawa. And nobody starts in journalism at CTV in the nation's capital, but I just got very, very lucky. I got a 1-week practicum with them while I was still in school. And some great stories kind of fell into my lap. I made a lot of phone calls. I got these stories. The cameraman took pity on me and helped me through them. We had a tremendous blizzard, and they assigned me to get on the phone and find out details of all the little towns around Ottawa. Max Keeping was the anchor. He loved those little towns. He led the newscast with all these things that I had picked up, and they got this impression, hey, this kid's good, and they hired me for the summer job. And then they wondered what happened as I became a rookie like everybody else, but they were nice enough to keep me. Then I got a job in Saskatchewan at CKCK in Regina, which was a terrific station for the prairies, #1 by a mile in Regina, as a weekend producer and anchor. And I can tell you, I was absolutely brutal. I couldn't say good evening without stumbling. I'm amazed I didn't get fired after the first show, but again, my news director was very patient. He let me go on, doing it fairly badly until I kind of got the hang of it. And that's the kind of lucky breaks sometimes you need. One thing I did back when I was at the university was I ran the Student Union film series, and this was way back before online movies or pay-per-view or DVDs or even VHS. We ordered our movies, and they came in on giant film reels, and we played those at a big auditorium at the university. And the ticket cost $2, not for the one night, but for the 8-week series. So we packed the place with students who love to see those hit films. When I got to see CKCK, he knew I was a film buff, so my boss asked me if I wanted to do a movie review. And a sideline career was born where I would eventually meet pretty much every major movie star and director in the business. You saw some of them, you know, from George Burns to Tom Cruise to Meryl Streep to Steven Spielberg and on and on. Eventually I got to Calgary, where I worked at Channels 2 and 7 with Ed Whalen and the Calgary Flames and lots of other great people. And in Calgary I met my wife Kirsty. We were actually in a garage rock band together. She was a singer and I was a piano player. And since then we've had 5 great kids and now have 3 grandkids. The lucky breaks have just kept on coming. Now 4 of our 5 kids are working with us in our business, and 3 of our nephews work in our company, and Kirsty's sister is our general manager. She's extraordinarily capable. Our oldest son, the one kid, by the way, that's not in our business is in med school. She's a terrific hockey player, and she's in 2nd year med school. I don't think she's going to work in television. She loves being a doctor. Our oldest son was also in medicine for many years. He got a degree in nursing and psychology, and he was a manager. He just got tired of the healthcare system in this province. It was a frustrating place to work as a manager. He came over to our business a few years ago with tremendous management skills from a different perspective than anything that was going on in our company. And he also was a very creative guy and became a really good filmmaker. So he's a bit of a rainmaker in our company with these, you know, an interesting mixture of skills, many of them coming from experience from someplace else. And so that has been a blessing. All these people from our family and our business, we didn't plan it. We didn't push any of our kids to get involved. It just sort of happened, and maybe they started to get a feeling or a sense of excitement that Kirsty and I have had a chance to experience, and I got interested that way, but we didn't push for it. The nice thing about working with family is you are hiring people that you can trust and people that you're very happy to pass the business on to. It is extremely gratifying, and it adds an extra sense of pride and purpose in what we do. So if I'm supposed to offer any advice, well, first of all, I don't feel I'm qualified. I think it's presumptuous of me to talk about advice, but I guess I would say this one thing about business, business and family business. I like this phrase, the gift of work. The gift of work. So find something you love to do. Everybody says that, and I think it's fantastic advice. Find somebody that you love who understands your passion for what you do and maybe even can share in it with you. I can't tell you how many successful people I have talked to, men and women, who at home share all the stuff that's going on. And whether the guy is a CEO of a major oil company, he gets home, he talks things over with his best partner. This is so important. And then the other thing is, let your kids follow their heart. And it just might all work out for you. I hope it does. I hope it all works out for you. Thanks a lot for today.